Hello everyone. Here we will study the first chapter, Law of Contract and Introduction. The index of this chapter, which we will take and study is, first we will take the meaning of law, then we will try to understand what is the definition and meaning of contract, and finally we will take the agreement and contract, both are as technical jargons, and then we will study why all contracts are agreement but all agreements are not a contract. And in last, we will take a study of introduction of Indian law of contract. First, we need to understand what is the meaning of law. Always remember, law is a body of rules, and the purpose of these rules is to govern the society, and they are made by the governing authorities always, but these can be implemented only by the judicial authorities. Always remember students, if any time you are making a discussion for law, these points are very essential to understand. First, why we are carrying law. The purpose is just to govern the society, to make a balance in the society. We require some set of rules, and that set of rules actually known as law. Next point is that who is actually authorized to prepare the law. In India, only the parliament or the governing authorities are actually entitled to make the laws. And last, who is having the power to implement the law. In India, basically, we are having a structure where judicial system can only implement the law. Now, we will study the portion law of contract. The law of contract is the most important branch of business law or commercial law. Even you can say this is the base of the business law. This has a vital significance not only for the business world but only for all of us as well as. So if suppose you are reading business law anytime, remember that in business law of contract is an essential internal part. If you have done the meaning of law of contract in depth, then you will actually able to study the business law in fact in detail. And law of contract is a base of business law, because contract is not important for business, it's parallelly important for our daily life as well as. The reason behind it that in our routine life we used to do contract from daily morning to till evening even. Why we used to do, for example, suppose when we buy something, when we sell something, when we borrow something, essentially we feel that we are just making some agreements, and that agreement, if suppose legal agreement, then it will be kind of a contract. For example, from morning, just if you see that a newspaper hawker is just coming to your room and just he is giving a newspaper to you, this is again a simple example of that you are having an agreement between him. Therefore, he is sending newspaper to you and you are paying him the amount for that newspaper. Parallelly, if you are going to a shop, you are buying clothes, you are buying books, you are buying stationery, journey tickets. This is all and all that you are doing in your daily routine life from morning to till evening. These are actually an example of agreement, and these agreement is actually an essential or internal part of contract. Now again we will continue their meaning. And business, at every moment we feel that there may be a transaction and which gives rise to a contract. Business always we do just to do an expansion, and that expansion is only possible when we do transaction, and that transaction definitely give a birth to a contract or an agreement. So the law of contract is a fundamental to the existence of business world. This is very true. Business world basically depend on the law of contract. Even you feel that if law of contract is not established, suppose it will not in the society, definitely the economic system will may collapse, because you will be not able to regulate your transactions, you will not able to regulate your agreements, and definitely your business will stop and your economic system may collapse. Now this was what actually the meaning, general meaning of law of contract. Now we need to understand what is the legal meaning of law of contract. A contract is an agreement between two or more persons, creating an obligation upon them to fulfill or not to fulfill some duties laid down specifically in the agreement. This is what actually is the legal definition of contract. They are saying that contract is an agreement between two or more party. It means that minimum two party always you require. More than two may be possible definitely. And due to an agreement, few obligations, duties may create on the parties between an agreement. And you need to follow that duties. Basically, this is a legal burden. This agreement creates a legal relationship between the parties. If suppose A and B, they are making an agreement between them, it means both they are known as the parties of the agreement. After making an agreement, it will be kind of a legal agreement. Then due to legality, some duties or some obligations will come on both A and B, and they have to follow that obligations. If suppose they will not follow, definitely judicial can be taken some actions against the defaulters. So this is actually the legal meaning, and it says that there are some legal binding behind an agreement, and that agreement will convert into law of contract. Now we will take some legal definitions of law of contract. First definition by Sir Frederick Pollock. He said every agreement and promise which are enforceable by law is a contract. This is very pure and truth definition. They are saying that first, contract is an agreement, either a promise. Promise means when, like suppose one party is doing something and next party is willing to follow that rules. This is a promise actually. This is an agreement actually. If suppose both the promises, either agreement, are actually enforceable by law, then it will be a contract. Now important question is that how we can say that these promises or agreement will be enforceable by law. For this you always need to follow with the legal objectives and legal consideration of an agreement. If your objective or your consideration are illegal, definitely it will be never enforced by the law. Simon said that an agreement which create and define obligations between the parties is law of contract. This is again very beautiful definition has been given by Simmons to us, that he said, as we know that contract is an agreement where two or more parties are actually doing that, and agreement will be legal agreement, therefore it will create a legal relationship between them. And due to legal relationship, one legal binding will come in the picture, and they will create some obligation for both the parties. So if suppose you feel that due to an agreement you are having some legal obligations, then definitely it will be a law of contract only. Now the third definition, a contract is an agreement which is enforceable by law made between two or more persons by whom rights are acquired by one or more to act or to abstain on the part of the others. This is again given by the Pollock. Here actually he emphasized basically on the essential characteristics of a contract. He said first, this is an agreement. As we know that this is purely an agreement, but this agreement should be always between two or more persons. Secondly, he said, then he actually defined that due to an agreement some rights are taken care by few parties, for which they are getting right to do something or not to do something basically. In last definition, Justice Torres said that a contract is deliberate agreement or engagement between the competent parties upon a legal consideration to do or don't to do something. This is what actually a contract. Again here he actually emphasized basically on the essential characters of a contract. He said contract is basically a deliberate engagement or agreement. Definitely this is right, that because both the parties who are actually having an intention to do the contract, they have come together with an intention to do an agreement. So this is a deliberate engagement. And here both the parties are actually competent. Incompetent parties can't do a contract. So this is next characteristics of the contract. And next is that they require a legal consideration. Consideration means what are actually the objectivity of your contract and the consideration you require to do something or not to do something. So this is the definition from which you can understand the meaning of contract in other point of view. So in crux we can say that contract is basically an agreement between two or more parties, and this is a deliberate engagement as well as, and this agreement should be always enforceable by law, and it depends if suppose your objective of your consideration are legal, as well as your party should be competent to do something or not to do something, as basically a contract. Now, if suppose we will take the conclusion after this discussion, we will definitely reach on this point that every law of contract are agreement, but every agreement are not law of contract. This is very true line, and this line we need to just understand in depth if suppose anytime we are making a discussion for law of contract. As you know that contract is actually on initial stage, this is known as agreement. But later on that agreement will convert into contract. First point, we need to understand how that contract will convert, how that agreement will convert to the contract. So for this is true line which has been given to you. This is a punchline of law of contract. All agreements are not contract, but all contracts are agreement. It means it is not actually always compulsory that all agreement will convert into contract, but this is actually the fundamental fact. If there is a contract, it was earlier an agreement. So we'll study this point in depth in next slides. First, we need to understand what is agreement. Always remember, agreement is actually a combination of following points. You require first proposal, then you require acceptance, then finally you require a consideration if suppose you want to make an agreement. So these 3 points essentially you require. Students, remember we are now discussing here that all contracts are agreement, but all agreements are not contract. So for this punchline we are taking agreement individually and we will take contract individually. So for agreement, you know that 3 points you essentially desire. First is you require proposal, then you require acceptance, and finally you require consideration. What is the meaning of proposal, acceptance and consideration? We are taking here alone. This is an example in front of you. If suppose A is willing to buy a cell phone from B for a price of rupees 20,000 and B is also agreed to sell this deal. What is this? This is actually an agreement. Because A is giving a proposal to B and B is giving his acceptance to A, and moreover the consideration is also available in the deal. For A, consideration will be the cell phone, and for B the consideration will be rupees 20,000. So all the essential of an agreement we are carrying here. We are carrying proposal, we are carrying acceptance, as well as we are having here consideration. So it is first an agreement, then it is due to enforceability by law, it will be a law of contract. Now we need to understand what is actually these points. In simple meaning, agreement means a promise. It is created when one person makes an offer to another person and that another person accepted that proposal. Even every promise and every set of promises forming consideration for each parties are an agreement. And last example, if suppose A had given a proposal to B and B actually accepted that proposal and consideration was available in picture, so that was actually an agreement. Agreement is equal to the actually promise. Promise means when one person is saying to do something or not to do something and next person is actually ready to follow the rules of one person, that is known as agreement. So agreement is a combination of offer, acceptance and consideration. Now we need to study what is actually proposal. The term proposal is very similar to the term offer. The term proposal is the base of an agreement. As you know that always agreement starts with proposal, and proposal says offer. Offer says that when you are showing to just express your willingness. A proposal or offer is an expression of willingness by one person to another to enter into an agreement on that terms which are stated by him with an intention to obtain the consent of the other party. This is really the beautiful definition has been given for the proposal. Proposal means when one person is just expressing his willingness to the another person to do something or not to do something, on behalf of his certain condition. And why he is expressing this is important point over here, because he is willing to take the consent of the next party to whom actually he is showing his willingness. This is actually a proposal. For example, again, just try to suppose it that A is just showing his willingness to B, that he is actually ready to buy his mobile phone for rupees 20,000, and only in that case he will buy if suppose he will just give the delivery by today evening as well as. So this is the condition, this is the willingness, and this is the consideration as well as, which is putting by A to B. So all conditions, all circumstances are fulfilling over here. One is that if one person is showing his willingness, that is A. Next thing is that he's showing his willingness under some conditions that has been already just explained this example. And why he's putting this, because he is actually willing to take the consent of owner of cell phone B, that he is ready to sell his phone to A. So this is actually entirely the meaning of a proposal. The person who is making the proposal is known here as proposer, and the person to whom it is actually made known as offeree. If suppose A gave the proposal to B, A will known as offerer and B will known here as offeree. And after the acceptance of the proposal, the person making the proposal is known as promiser, and the person who accepts the proposal known as acceptor. Because prior to taking the consent of the person to whom proposal was made, it was actually an offer only. But when this offer has been accepted, now the proposer will just convert to the promiser, and the offeree to whom proposal was made will convert to the acceptor. So their status will change after getting the acceptance. Now, few essential points we need to understand over here for proposal. Number one is, in any proposal, at least two parties you must require. This is very, very important point. Always two parties you require for proposal. The reason behind it that one will be that who will give the proposal, and next will be that to whom you will give the proposal. So first will be proposer and second will be offeree. A proposal may be the positive or negative. This is also very essential to understand that proposal may be positive or may be negative as well as. If suppose A is saying that he will do that work, it may be proposal as well as. If suppose A is saying that he will not do that work, this will also a proposal. A proposal must be made to obtain the consent of the next party to whom it was actually given. This is also very important. Why one person is giving proposal? Because he is actually willing, he is actually want to make sure that he will get consent of the next party to whom it was actually paid. Next point is, proposal must be made with an intention to create the legal relationship between the parties. If A is giving a proposal to buy the cell phone from B, it simply means that A is actually willing to make a legal relationship between B. If suppose he will not fulfill the condition, either the condition will not be fulfilled by the B, both have the right to move to the judicial to take the legal remedy. So if suppose you are having the intention to get the legal relationship, this is essentially you desire for a proposal. Next one is that proposal must be signified or communicated. Communicated means to whom you have to give the proposal, it should be always delivered to him. Next is, proposal may be expressed or implied. Sometimes you feel that you are just showing your expression, your willingness in written format, that is known as expressed proposal. Or sometimes you are just putting it by your expressions, by your gestures. So this is known as implied proposal. For example, just try to understand thus that A has given an advertisement in a newspaper to sell his car. This is actually a written proposal. And implied proposal is that on his car one tag has been actually pasted for sale. This is again an implied proposal that that car is actually offered to everyone who is willing to buy it. Few more points for proposal. Proposal or offer must be definite. It should not be indefinite. That for whom you are actually giving proposal, it should be always definite, it should be always very, very clear. terms and condition of proposal must be communicated with the proposal. If suppose X is giving a proposal to Y, then definitely with his proposal, he has to actually communicate some conditions, some terms. Proposal should not bind the other party to reply must. Always remember that you are giving a proposal with an intention to get the consent of the next party. But it doesn't mean that always you will bind him to give the consent. Next party is actually free to give his consent or not to give his consent. But proposal should not bind the party to give the consent only. When a proposal is accepted on the basis of some other terms or conditions which has been given in the proposal, so that will be not acceptance of the proposal, that will be actually a counter proposal. If suppose X said to Z that he will buy his car for 20,000, but Z said that he will sell only suppose X will pay 22,000 rupees. So this is not actually the acceptance of proposal. This is actually different something, and this is known as counter offer, which has been made by the Z to X. So if the person to whom proposal was made, he is accepting it on different condition, so that will be not acceptance actually, that will be a counter offer. Next point is when two people make similar offer to each other without having the knowledge of each other's proposal, known as cross offer. This is also very interesting point. If suppose X and Z parallelly simultaneously giving same proposal with same term and condition to each other, but because they actually didn't know that they are also having an intention to get it in the same way, so that will known as the cross offer. So cross offer means that both the parties are giving same proposal with same condition to each other without knowing the facts. So this is known as cross offer. Some more points regarding proposal. Proposal may be either specific, either general proposal. Specific means when you are just giving a proposal to a specific party, and general proposal means when you're giving a proposal to public at large, known as a general proposal. For example, if suppose A has given an advertisement in the newspaper, this is actually a general proposal. And parallelly, if A has given just specific proposal to B to just buy his car, that is actually specific proposal. So in specific proposal, only the specific party will actually entitled to give the consent, but in general proposal, anyone from the public at large give their acceptance. So this is actually entirely we discussed for proposal. So in nutshell, proposal is basically a willingness to show his expression. Now we will study the next part of agreement, which is known as acceptance. Acceptance is actually the consent of the party to whom proposal was made by the proposer. Even it is a communication of the intention of the second party regarding the conditions of the proposal. Example again is suppose X has given a proposal to Z on some condition, and now Z is actually accepting the proposal on behalf of the same condition, known here as acceptance. So acceptance is basically the communication of the consent of the proposal by the next party to the first party. Next is a proposal when accepted becomes a promise or agreement. Moreover, if this agreement will convert by the law, it will be a contract. This is very important point, that initially it is a proposal, and when proposal has been accepted, it will be kind of accepted proposal. And if suppose it will be legal acceptable proposal, then it will be definitely a contract. Now point is that who may accept the proposal? Only the person to whom the proposal was made is only entitled to accept it. But in case of any general proposal, because general proposal was made to public at large, anyone from the public who is actually willing to move with the condition of proposal, they can accept it. But in specific proposal to whom it was made, he is only liable or entitled to accept it. Now, few essential points of acceptance. Acceptance must be absolute or unqualified, because you suppose you're putting some conditions with acceptance, it will be kind of cross offer or counter offer. Acceptance must be in prescribed manner, which was clearly expressed in the proposal. If suppose it was told clearly by the proposer that the person to whom it was given, he should always express his willingness in a specific way. So in that case, he has to do the same. Otherwise, it will not deemed as acceptance. Acceptance may be given either by the performance of the condition as well as. If suppose A told to B that if suppose you want to sell your car, you have to give me a call for that. If suppose B is giving a call to A, it means he is performing the condition as well as. Acceptance may be given by the way of consideration as well as. Acceptance may be express or implied. It must be given in the specific time period what has been given always. If suppose specific time is not available, then it should be always given in the reasonable time period. It should not be from the unreasonable time period. It must be given when the proposal is in force. Suppose A told to B that if suppose you are ready to sell your property, you have to give it just by tomorrow. So by tomorrow only you have to communicate it. If suppose day after tomorrow you are putting your acceptance, it will not taken as acceptance, because day after tomorrow proposer will not enforce, it will actually stop at that time. And finally, that acceptance must be communicated. It should be communicated to that person from which it was actually just received proposal. And last point, it must be given by that person to whom proposal was made in case of specific proposal. Now we will study the next portion of agreement is consideration. As I said earlier that all contracts are agreement, but all agreements are not contract. So essentially we need to understand agreement. For agreement, I said that there are 3 points. First is proposal, acceptance and consideration. Now we are discussing here consideration. Consideration means the benefits for both the parties. If two parties are making an agreement, what both the parties are getting the benefits from the deal known as the consideration. So generally every agreement to be enforceable by law must be supported by the consideration. Normally an agreement without consideration is void and it will be never acceptable by the law. So every agreement should always require a consideration, and consideration should be always valid. If that is not valid, then the deal will be purely void or zero. And consideration means something which you are getting in return. For example, if A is giving a proposal to B, then B will definitely accept that proposal. In that case only, when he is actually accepting to return something, to get something in return of his promise. In other words, consideration means something which the both parties receives in return for their promise. In fact, it is the price paid on behalf of the promise to the promisee. For example, if A is purchasing a property from B and he is paying a amount of 10 lakh rupees to B, it means 10 lakh rupees will be consideration for B and property will be the consideration for A. So both the parties are getting some consideration due to a mutual deal. Few points are essential to understand. Consideration should be always lawful and real. It should not be unlawful or illegal or unrealistic. It should be realistic, it should be legal. If it is not, then definitely it will be never accepted by the law. It must have some value in terms of money. This is also important. It must be adequate or fit according to the situation. It should be always adequate, not inadequate, as well as it should always have some values. Now, the next point for study is how contract is different from agreement. As I said that first you need to do an agreement. An agreement is only possible to get it by 3 ways. First, proposal, acceptance and consideration. Now, what is contract? Contract is actually legal binding agreement between two or more parties. As I said earlier when we actually just discussed the legal meaning of contract. Contract is creating legal relationship between the parties, and parties are who actually made an agreement. So after making an agreement, contract will convert it into a legal relationship, and due to a legal relationship, some mutual obligations or some legal liabilities will come in the picture, and all the parties have to follow that, otherwise action can be taken by the judicial. Formula of contract now we'll study. The formula of contract is agreement plus enforceability by law. So initially you require an agreement, and then you will add the purpose of enforceability by the law. If it is there, then it will be a contract. So in crux you can say that contract is an extension of agreement. If you are having an agreement and that is the legal agreement, it will be definitely convert into contract. So now we need to study what is the meaning of enforceability of the agreement. Every agreement is not law of contract. Only those agreement which is enforceable by law will be deemed as law of contract. An agreement which is enforceable by law, then it creates some legal rights and obligation between the parties. This is actually the true definition of contract. Contract creates some legal relationship. Due to legal relationship, both the parties are actually liable or entitled to have some rights or obligations respectively. But all agreement will not create that legal relationship. So only those agreement who create the legal relationship, they will convert into contract. Therefore, this is actually the difference between the contract and agreement. So who can convert actually, which is the base to convert the agreement into the contract? It is only the legality. If your objective or your considerations are purely legal, then it will be definitely convert into the contract. Now in last, we'll study few points for Indian law of contract. Indian law of contract came into force on 1st September 1872, and this act just may be called in long name as Indian Contract Act 1872. Section 1 of this Contract Act specify that it is not applicable on the state J&K in India, because J&K is having the special status as per Article 370 of Indian Constitution. And this entire act has been divided in 75 sections, which we will study in next chapter onwards. So up to this, we have actually made a study of introductory part of law of contract, where we studied actually the meaning of contract, what is actually agreement, and how agreement is different from contract, why all agreements are not contract while all contract are agreement. Thank you so much.